Happy Pride Month, everyone. I know last week I promised that today's video or today's What You Missed video would focus on exploring Scott's coming out after winning the Stanley Cup and everything that might have skipped your notice when you watched that scene. But then Hudson won Best Lead Performer Drama at the Canadian Screen Awards for his performance as Shane in the first season of Eater Rivalry 2 nights ago, and thus I decided that, still in celebration of Hudson's win, to push my Scott slash skip video to next week. It's still Pride Month after all, so it all still fits perfectly well. And instead, I would like to explore the scene of Shane coming out to his parents, the layers to it, how it gave further depth to both his characterization and expounded further on his relationship with his parents, the things that were more overt and the ones that were more subtle with the scene, plus the slight differences from the books and what that changed and why it mattered. I mean, I keep repeating it, but as long as you all keep watching my heated rivalry videos, I will continue to make content about this show that we all love. So thank you for giving me continued permission to follow through on my obsession, perfectly valid coping mechanism that it is. Also, if there are any what you miss scenes that you would like me to cover that I haven't done yet, feel free to drop the request in the comments. I got you. Now, before I start talking about Shane coming out to his parents, I would first like to give a quick disclaimer about my What You Miss series. These are just my thoughts and opinions as I watch and rewatch the show, with occasional flashes of insight that pop in due to having read the books and being a lover of them as well. However, I am not about to proclaim myself as being the absolute authority on everything, since it's important we all remember that media is meant to be enjoyed, usually through our own interpretations and personal lenses. And as long as one isn't being bigoted or an absolute asshole, I'm usually more of a shrug. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions, just like I'm entitled to mine kind of girl. So, once again, thank you for giving me the space to yap about the show. And whilst we're at it, I would also like to say a big thank you to my lovely patrons and YouTube members whose support have been instrumental in helping me continue to make content, especially since I started doing this full time at the start of last year, which was the last time I was in paid employment. And a special shout out to Lena, Sherry, Holly, and Kat for their extra support. You get all the hearts and kisses too. Mwah. If you too would like to support me on Patreon or become a YouTube member to enjoy certain perks, maybe even get a shout out, the link to do so is in the description bar. Now, just as I do with this series, I am of the opinion that to fully appreciate and understand the nuances in a scene, it's always important to acknowledge its setup, i.e., the scenes that predate it, which set up the context for what we're about to witness. And in this case, before Shane comes out to his parents, there's the moment of peace, of quiet love, of joy between he and Ilya. The night before, Ilya had blotted out that he loves Shane, and Shane had echoed his own love for Ilya as well. They wake up the next morning and we see it visually represented that things have both changed, that they both have allowed their feelings to come through because, and I know it sounds cliche as hell, but it's a form of narrative storytelling to visibly show that Shane and Ilya have gone from fucking to making love. And why, with other characters and stories, that might seem like a reach or just too on the nose, it works very well for them. The soft morning light, the way it seems like they are even more physically entwined than they usually are, the maintained eye contact, the gentleness with the thrust, all of this is meant to communicate that both Shane and Ilya really have reached the point in their relationship where they have successfully shed all walls and let their vulnerabilities shine through. Now, afterwards, they are both lying in bed. Ilya is still slightly sad, looking into the distance. Now, a lot of us would interpret his look differently, but for me, I read it as him still feeling raw. Yes, he's declared his love to Shane and vice versa, but he knows that life as he knows it has changed forever for him. There's a hint of sadness there at what he's letting go. I personally think that it's a moment when it really hits for him that he's never going to be able to go back to Russia anymore, would never get the chance to walk the streets that he once called home. He's never going to see his niece grow up. Yes, he gets to be with the man he loves, but he's also going to have to give up so many things in order to have that love. And whilst Ilya doesn't regret that, he will always choose Shane. it doesn't mean that it doesn't make him a little sad. And that's the point when Shane asks for Ilya's mother's name, to which Ilya responds with Irina and wonders why. Shane tells him the other part of the plan, something that he's clearly been thinking about and wants to do right by Ilya and by the incredible woman who birthed and raised him and whose loss broke him, even as his love for her and vice versa grounded him. He tells Ilya about his idea for the summer camp, a way to connect with young players in the sports that he both love, and whilst helping to mold these young players, the money received will be given to mental health institutions in honor of Irina's struggles. Something that matters even more when you consider what Ilya goes through in the second book, which I'm not going to get into because major spoilers, although I will be making videos about the individual books and the characters as per a request from Ada Black Angel. I got you, boo. But back to what I was saying, Shane proposes the Irina Foundation as a way to honor the woman who raised this man he loves. This is soft, sensitive, incredible, kind, brash, asshole Ilya, who exists as he is because Irina was just as amazing and just as incredible. And Ilya, who sees all of this, who understands what Shane is truly offering, a way for the world to know that his mother existed, that she mattered, that she tried her best, even though she lost in the end, that she and her struggles will not be erased the way Grigory had arranged for her to be after Ilya had found her lifeless body as a child. Ilya sees all of this, sees what Shane is offering in his overthinking, overplanning way, and whispers that Irina would have loved Shane like he loves Shane. This scene is extremely important for Shane coming out to his parents and Junior and David, by extension, getting to meet Ilya, not as a rival that they should hate on principle, but as the man that their son loves. And we'll get to that in a bit, of course. Anyway, Shane asks Ilya to tell him that he loves him in Russian again, and Ilya does just that. And they have yet more moments of calm, just peace and quiet, with Ilya holding Shane. The next scene, Ilya is in the water and asks if that's the area where Shane does his yoga, which Shane immediately understands to mean that Ilya had watched his documentary. Now, Ilya doesn't deny it, of course, but instead parrots his words to Svetlana the first time he had seen it, that he needed help sleeping and it was boring enough to do the job. Now, I already mentioned it in my What Shane being boring means to Ilya video, but we know that the boring he uses in that sentence is Ilya talking about the home, the comfort, the familiarity and certainty, the peace and tranquility that Shane brings and that Ilya got to experience, even through the screen as he watched the documentary of Shane's home. Shane responds by calling Ilya an asshole, fondly. Ilya splashes water on him. Shane squawks about how his phone would have been in his pocket. And Ilya points out that Shane's phone was on the table and it had been ringing all morning. This, of course, was to foreshadow for we, the audience, that someone has been trying to get a hold of Shane, someone who might very well be on their way to crash Shane's retreat because he hadn't been picking up his calls. We then have the gimme kiss moment, which is just so cute. And I've been liking all the fun art made from that because I repeat, cute. They finish swimming and head back to the cottage, talking about what they would have for lunch. And now in the books, they've had sex by this point, but it's not really shown in the show. And Ilya kisses Shane, with Shane kissing him back, both of them unaware that Shane has a visitor who's caught them right in the act, until Ilya notices and Shane turns around to look at what caught Ilya's attention, only to see that it's David. David, who is standing shocked and then immediately walks away. By the time Shane and Ilya make it inside and Shane goes after his father, David has already driven off, leaving Shane to have a panic attack at the realization that his father just walked in on him and Ilya. Now, I do recall Tierney mentioning that the way in which Odson had interpreted that particular scene, with him panicking out of his mind, needing to ground himself, was Odson's own interpretation and choice. And I think it's brilliant because whilst the scene on its surface is David walks in, spots Ilya, and Shane realizes that Shane is gay and with Ilya and walks away, there's so much more to that act, to that situation, to that circumstance. The first is the fact that Shane does feel invaded, something that David is quite aware of, and part of why he doesn't say anything when he gets back home, but I will get to that in a minute. As I was saying, Shane feels his space invaded. He had told Ilya when they were on their way to the cottage that he had told his parents that he was on a silent retreat, meaning in his head, there would have been No interruptions, no intrusions, just he and Elia working out their relationship and what they mean to each other. He hadn't braced himself for David showing up. He wasn't expecting it. This safe cocoon that he and Elia had built and sustained in the past days suddenly crashes all around him with his father's presence, and that is already destabilizing. It puts Shane immediately on the wrong foot. Then comes him telling Elia that all of this is his fucking nightmare, not just being outed to his parents before he's ready, but also them having to deal with the fact that he had not told them the truth all this while, that he had been lying by omission about the truth of who he is. Now, I will always belong to the camp, the school of thought that believes that as queer people, we don't owe anyone that bit of ourselves. We get to decide when we feel comfortable or safe enough to share the truth of our identity. Until that happens, everyone else can either guess or sit their asses down until we are ready to come out to them. My mom might have suspected for years, but it wasn't until I came out to her that she knew for certain. The same with my friends, although my besties already knew, but then it's part of their superpowers, so I wasn't really surprised. Also, because we are all queer, so duh. Anyway, back to Shane. He's panicking at what this means. His mom finding out, his parents believing that he's been lying to them all this while, and he doesn't voice it out loud. But that's yet another place, another way in which we see Hudson's physical acting being so goddamn good, because he's very physically spiraling. And whilst he's not voicing out everything he's thinking, we can presume that he's probably all stuck on how everything would crumble and it will be met with the worst possible outcome, a living nightmare in itself, which is why Ilya's calm response that maybe it's time for Shane to wake up is so apt. One, because yes, Shane needs to stop spiraling and go see his parents to handle this, but also because no one else can possibly understand the panic, the sheer panic and fear of everything going catastrophically wrong, the trepidation about disappointing your parents, bracing yourself for what their response would be. And finally, Ilya is very much aware that the Hollanders are nothing like Gregory Rosanov. And whilst the man he loves panics, he knows that at least the outcome wouldn't be as horrible as Shane assumes it would be. After all, they did raise Shane Hollander, did they not? This incredibly sensitive and kind and slightly neurotic and obsessive man with the biggest of hearts, who just that morning had given his mother and her memory a chance to live on in how they choose to give back to their community. Ilya doesn't say it, but I like to read it as why he's so calm and comforting in that scene. He's seen the absolute worst a parent can be, and he knows for certain that that cannot possibly apply to the Hollanders. And so when Shane reiterates that he's scared, Ilya tells him that he's brave, and he means it too. Then he cracks a joke about maybe David not having noticed them to help ease the tension, and it works. Although Shane is back to panicking again about what he's going to have to say, since he had already put together a plan. Plans her how Shane organizes, how he preps and braces himself to ensure that all his ducks are in tidy rows to help mitigate disasters that might want to follow. He had a plan about how to ease his parents into the news, and now said plan is shot to shit. Ends the second bout of panic at the realization, and Ilya offers to come with him for support. Shane might not have been able to be physically present for Ilya back when Gregory died, but he was still there, offering a distraction, giving him an outlet to just let it all out. And now Ilya gets to do the same for Shane in a way, a full circle moment, if you will. They arrive at Shane's parents' place, and we immediately see Yuna confused about Shane being there. But not just being there with Elia. And that is all the more proof we need to know that when David arrived back home, he didn't say anything to Yuna about what he had seen. He might have interrupted and accidentally found out the truth about their son before said son was ready to share it with them, but was not about to oust Shane to Yuna. That was Shane's choice and prerogative. Now, it's a little thing, that bit when Shane is at the door as he comes in and goes, "It's me." It's Shane, that just tickles my brain a little bit, because technically, Shane doesn't need to announce himself, just as he doesn't need to knock on the door to gain entrance to it. It is his parents' house, and as their son, he's always welcome to come home. The issue, though, is symbolically things have changed. Not just because David walked in on a secret, but because that secret will in turn fundamentally change how he's perceived by his parents. He's no longer the straight heterosexual Shane that they had assumed, but is now openly gay. So symbolically, that statement as he enters is a reintroduction. And hey, it's me, it's Shane, your son. A bit different, very much gay, but still your son, and this is the real me in all my glory. Like I said, it's a little line, one that is also in the book. I mean, 90% of what we got in the show, we also got in the books, because, like I like to say, they are amazing books as well. But as I was saying, it's a little bit that Rachel had added in, and that is how I like to interpret it. So I thought to share. But back to Shane, he enters and David immediately starts apologizing, mentioning that he came over to pick up the old charger at Shane's place, which works better for his phone. And of course, it's quite different from the books when he had popped in because they had been out of dishwashing tablets and he wanted to get a spare from Shane. And Shane stops him, points out that David shouldn't have found out that way either, which is an acknowledgement as well that it must have been a sudden shock, that realization for David and what he walked in on, which is so well portrayed because, yes, this moment is about Shane, but there's also the need to acknowledge that he knows it must have shocked his dad, who, I repeat, had said nothing to Yuna at this point. Yuna, who wonders what is going on until Shane drops the info on her that he is gay, something he had planned to tell her sometime soon, and he's sorry that he's only just telling her. And then he introduces Ilya, mentions that he's been visiting, and then trails off when it's time to define what they are to each other. Now, the show just has Shane trail off, whilst in the book, we get to be in his head and realize that the reason he stopped talking is because whilst the two of them had expressed their love for each other at that point, they actually hadn't quite defined their relationship just yet. What label would they be more comfortable with, for example? And so when Ilya pops up with the lovers, Shane shuts it down. One, because of course he's not about to imprint images of his sex life onto his parents, but also it's not exactly a label that Shane considers the most fitting for who they are, nor is it one he's utterly comfortable with. Yuna is surprised, points out that Shane hates Ilya, though, to which Shane replies that he might sometimes hate him with the silence when he's being an asshole in there, but mostly he loves him. And that is the first time that Shane Hollander is telling another living soul outside of Ilya how much he loves Ilya Rozanov. And guts, that guts to me, it got me in the gut. Shane then asks for them all to sit down, and when they do, Yuna states that she and David did have their suspicions about the possibility of Shane being gay, and David continues with a what they didn't suspect, though, was that Shane was on such friendly terms with Rozanov, which is when Ilya cuts in with Ilya and David corrects himself. Once again, it's those little moments that get me because here Ilya doesn't want to be seen as Rozanov, the persona that he had cultivated on the ice in his almost a decade career so far playing hockey. He wants the Hollanders, Shane's parents, the ones whose genes brought into being this man he absolutely adores, to see him as himself, the true him who loves their son. And I repeat, it gets to me, makes my soul and spirit soar, because it's the start of him wanting the Hollanders to love him too, just as he knows his mother's spirit most certainly loves Shane, and as she would have physically loved him as well, were she still alive. And then, of course, comes the question of when their relationship started. The one thing that, slight spoiler warning, would be a reoccurring question for those who eventually discover slash are told the truth. And then David gets this look in his eyes as he connects the dots, remembers how seemingly close the two of them looked during the Tampa Bay All Stars weekend, and wonders if it happened then, which is different from the books, mind you, because in the books, it was Yuna who asked the All Stars question. Just like it was still Yuna who, after Shane admits that it's been since their rookie season, whilst Ilya cuts in that it was a little before that, the summer before actually. In the books, it was Yuna and not David who is the one who makes the statement in the show that blots out that if there were no nice men in Montreal, which is a haha moment, but also we know that Shane adores Ilya being an asshole, is asshole. And so, of course, the nice men in Montreal held no interest for him. Of course, there's a bit with Yuna and David wondering if Shane and Ilya had been in love since they were 18, to which they both yell out no. And Shane, to his horror, has experienced once again gained insight into his sex life with Ilya, not like Ilya is any help whatsoever. That stinker, it was just glorious. The conversation then moves to the serious bits. Both Shane and Ilya admitting that no one else knows about them, that their love has to be kept a secret. And you see the moment when Yuna and David realize the magnanimity of what the secret is, the burden it would place on Shane and Ilya to keep such a core part of themselves hidden until the end of their career, and how heartbreaking it is when you think about it. Of course, amidst this, Yuna can't help but ask if Shane at any point had let Ilya win, to which Shane asks as if she's ever let David win at cards. And we get even more confirmation that Shane's absolute competitiveness and bloodthirstiness was gotten from his mother, even though it's David that played college hockey. Now, some people might feel offended on Shane's behalf that Yuna had even bothered asking that, but it's also a great foreshadowing for mild spoilers again, certain events that happen in the long game. Yuna and David continue to ask their questions, and Ilya admits that he's bisexual, and he also admits that whilst there might have been others, he's only been in love with Shane. And Shane echoes the words with their feet touching, bringing back that moment in their first conference as they communicate with their feet to each other in a "I'm here, I've got you, we've got this." Okay. My heart. Also, shout outs to David stocking good Russian vodka at home, which is such a subtle way to show that even before Ilya had joined their family, serendipity had already made space for him in the Hollander household. A change from the books when David had simply handed Ilya a beer. Now back to Yuna though, seeing Shane and Ilya admit how much they love each other drives home even more for Yuna how much Shane has had to hide, and she walks away. Now, this conversation about expectations and acceptance and forgiveness between mother and son doesn't happen in the books, but I love that Jacob incorporated it in the show because it's absolutely brilliant and beautiful, and what so many queer kids hope is their experience with their parents, and it made me bawl my eyes out. Now, I already made a video about that conversation, so you can go check it out if you haven't yet. But yes, Yuna and Shane walk back in and are seated at the table with David and Ilya. Yuna immediately goes into planning mode, and we again see where Shane got it from. Planning is how Yuna and Shane center themselves, ground themselves, but it's also how they show care for those they love. And whilst Shane does it for Ilya and his grand plan where they get to be together and honor Ilya's mother, Yuna does it for both her boys because at this point they are both her boys and she has it all down. Official statements for just in case their relationship ever gets accidentally leaked, mother knows best, and brand deals for when Shane and Ilya both are ready to go public, since she knows that perception is everything and whoever holds the heart of the marketplace wins. It would be damn difficult for either Shane or Ilya to be shafted by the league or to be portrayed as something other or less if they come out on top first and manage how they are seen via marketing and advertising. And that was what she was aiming for. Now, I know a lot of people had a problem with that scene since they thought that Yuna was only focusing on the money and running railroad over Shane, but it's just her way to secure both boys, to make sure that both boys are secure with contingencies in place. And I totally understand where she's coming from, especially with how certain events played out. Not going to say what exactly, because spoilers. Of course, Shane shuts it down and says that they aren't ready for that party yet. And she accedes and steps back, then turns to Ilya, who to her is forsaking the team that made him, the team that he owes his loyalty to. And Shane cuts in with the Ilya is trying to be loyal to him. Ilya just finds it funny because, of course, Hollander, one of the two beings who made Shane, is as obsessive as her son. Or rather, her son is as obsessive about Oki as she is. David then pipes in to ask if either of the boys have spoken to Scott. Now, in the books, it's Yuna that asks this question, by the way. And it's such an interesting way to see how David is given such a more prominent role in the show. Like in the books, he fades into the background a lot, and Yuna is the one that, takes charge and takes over a lot in the conversations. Although David also does have his great highlight moments. But in the show, he gets more of a presence, and I really appreciate that, especially in this coming out scene. But as I was saying, David then pipes in to ask if either of the boys had spoken to Scott, which was a question asked by Yuna in the books. And while Shane says that he hasn't, Ilya says that he did, to tell Scott that what he had done mattered and was brave, especially because it changed things for him and Shane. Not that he told Scotty the last part, of course. Now, it's interesting to me because in the books, both Shane and Ilya had reached out to Scott. Matter of fact, it was Shane who emailed Scott to tell him that what he had done was very brave and mentioned to his parents and Ilya that Scott's actions were what changed things for him, made him brave and happy and wanting to try to let himself have that happiness. This is, of course, when Shane has another panic attack. In the show, it feels like it came on suddenly, but in the books, we read his thoughts, how the realization hits him all at once that they are here in his parents' home. He and Ilya both. He's told his parents the truth. They know, they are happy for him, talking about Shane and Ilya like they are together and will remain together and are making plans for that. Like it's a foregone conclusion. And that is, of course, when Shane gets lighthearted at the speed of everything ends the panic attack. And Ilya is there, calling Shane's name, rubbing soothing circles across the back of his neck, reminding him that they are good there, that Shane's family is there, his boyfriend is there, they are good there. And that's the one that gets Shane to finally look up because finally they have a definition for what they are, a label. Boyfriends, and it's wonderful in how well it fits. They kiss, and Yuna and David look on happily that their son has found love with the person he's been with since his rookie season, the summer before, actually. And then we get to the end. Shane and Ilya are leaving. Yuna is sending him off after she's well and truly fed Ilya, by the way. Ilya, for whom this was most likely the first homemade meal made by her mother that he's had since his own mother died. And now he gets to have that with Yuna. Oh, and then, God, my heart. There's, of course, the moment of levity of the boys insisting that Yuna and David text first before coming over. And whilst Yuna doesn't get the reason for the insistence, David, who had just recently witnessed Ilya grabbing his son's ass, knows exactly what is being left unsaid and promises that they will text first. And as Shane and Ilya drive off into the sunset, it's such a bittersweet moment and feeling because, yes, they love each other. And yes, they are out to David and Yuna, but so much of their love and of themselves has to remain in the shadows. And whilst it's a happy ending that they get to be together, it's still a bit sad that they aren't fully and openly together, at least not yet. But yeah, I don't know if you all can tell with how long I have been yapping, but I really, really adore this scene and had to share all my thoughts. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would, as always, love to hear yours. Whether or not you agree with me, please share them in the comments. Like this video, however, if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet, but enjoyed anything of what I had to say, share it so others can find my channel as well. Or you can check out my gaming or ASMR channels if they sound like something you might potentially be interested in. I have them both linked in the description bar. I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.